Now, I said in my last video, if you haven't already watched it, go watch it. I said in my last video, I would talk about something that's a little bit more about the ethics of photography and how I opened a bit of a can of worms in a Facebook group. And this is talking about photographing the perceived homeless. And I'm going to say perceived homeless because people on the streets are not necessarily always homeless. And I've been asked to make sure I use the term perceived homeless. So I am going to. This is an adult discussion. I am not going to say what I know is to be right and then what I go is the standard. But I would like to have this open discussion about it, because when I did this video, when I actually did this post in a certain Facebook group, the amount of differing opinions that came out were quite diverse. And people were quoting people like Dorothea Lange, who was saying that the camera is an instrument and that teaches people how to see without a camera or something. And I was like, yeah, okay, you can quote many people at me, but there is also grounds that these are individuals on the street. So I want us to talk about this. I want us to talk about how we feel about it and where we sit. I want to reiterate, this is just a discussion video. It'd be great to have you in the comments. So let's get into kind of me trying to weigh up both sides of it, because I think if you're going to present it, you have to present it effectively. Now, I will say there are many people who've written great articles. One is by a gentleman called John Simpson, I think his name is, and it was in the Street Photography magazine. Go read that. Just Google it. You can see lots and lots. And everyone kind of has a mixed opinion. And in this Facebook group, one of the people said, I'm a judge and I knowingly downgrade people for that because I think it's low-hanging fruit. And that is a term that I heard quite a lot when I was doing my research for this. People feel, some people, a preface, feel that photographing homeless people is just an easy win. And that's something that felt uncomfortable with me. Easy win. And then you have to remember that when you photograph a person, you are using that single frame as context for them. That you are creating the atmosphere of what they are. You are presenting to the outside world what's about them. And I feel like there's a difference between street photography and photojournalism, because we know that journalists often feature documentaries about them, and that's a difference. There has context to go with that. There is more than just the shot and gone. There is context added, whereas in street photography, there's very little context often added, in my opinion. That's the shot I'm presenting to you. Get the impression, if you will, of how I've captured it and how it presents in the frame. And I think that's where we kind of sit there. Photos can capture real life moments, but when it comes to photographing homeless people or perceived homeless people, are we really representing them, or are we putting our own opinion on them? This is a very deep video, so by all means, if it's not for you, I appreciate that. In the chats I had, there were many people saying, oh, I'm using it to raise awareness. And I did argue, as devil's advocate, if you don't know what devil's advocate for, and I'll put the meaning down here for you, that are you raising awareness, or are you putting that in your portfolio? Because if you're raising awareness, you would be using that to promote with maybe adding context, such as an article, or submitting it to a greater cause rather than just adding it to your portfolio. I'm in a group where you can see people submitting pictures of people from perceived homeless people into competitions and submitting them as they are with no additional context. And I kind of think, are you raising awareness? Because what is that image actually doing? Because as far as a lot of what I'm seeing, and I'm going to be, and I dare I say, put my neck on the block with this, you aren't really doing much other than giving yourself credit and not that individual. Now, that brings me on to when people say, oh, no, what I'm trying to do is that I'm giving them compensation, such as I spoke to them and they wanted food. The idea is that you will take their picture as long as you give them food, which is a basic human subsistence. And again, devil's advocate on this, is that a fair trade? You are potentially outing them to their families, people who may not know that they're homeless, and putting it online without any additional context. If you're just doing it as photography, I mean, it's a bit different if you're part of a campaign. And so we're just looking at this from a street photography, street portrait perspective. And you are creating a narrative within that frame without any additional, and exposing them to people who may not know, and all because you bought them a sandwich. Is that a fair trade? Again, please understand this is open for discussion. Now, everyone has a right to decline an image or not have an image. And people say, oh, but they're in the public, they're fair game. And I feel like there is a time and a place where it is ethical, because legally, yes, you can take the picture, but ethically, where do you sit? There is many photographers who I saw who actually take photos of people on the street without showing their faces. They do it in an anonymous kind of way, which I feel is like a great middle ground. But again, how do you feel if you were to be photographed in your worst possible day and someone's there with a camera? And I feel like I feel like that presents in itself an emotional and an ethical dilemma, how you as a person would want to be photographed and how you perceive the person on the street. Because I mean, it was in one of the groups I brought it up where someone said, well, I wouldn't want someone to photograph me on my bad day, but you know, it's different when you're on the street, you're in public. I wouldn't be crying in the public. I wouldn't be crying in public. And I was like, what? Like that kind of, yeah. There is also some people who don't do the consent. They take the picture because they're in public and they go, well, I'm allowed to, that's the law and I can do that. And it raises issues about privacy and agency over that person. Yes, they're in public space, but imagine someone capturing the most difficult point of your life without your knowledge and then sharing it with the world. I don't care if it's just your camera grip, sharing it without your knowledge. Photographing people on the street can sometimes perpetuate sort of stereotypes and negative ones at that. By focusing solely on their poverty, it kind of reduces them to like this one-dimensional character rather than fully fleshing out their story, which is what I said to you about it needs to have context. If photojournalism has context, whereas street photography doesn't always have context. And is that actually appropriate? Is that ethical? Does that feel right to you? Again, we're just having a discussion here, but this is something I feel that we don't often talk about. But I do want to say that some of the things I found, most people are against it in the groups I was in. There was this big thing where people saying, no, I'm not for it. I don't like it. The judge who said, I regularly mark it down. I think it's low hanging fruit. I think it's lazy. I think people do it because it looks dramatic and it's one of those things that they just want to do. And I want to have a picture of it. Now, I can't say, hand on heart, isn't that sorry? that I have not photographed a homeless person. I have. His name was George. We had a friendship. I was very open about our friendship with George. I sometimes did his washing. I bought him food. George actually stopped me getting mugged. That's how we met. And he always used to see me walking around with my camera and he used to ask me to take his photograph and I used to print them off and give them to him. And I never put them online until he actually said, oh, can you put them online so my friends can see? And I did not present George online as a homeless person. I said, this is my friend George. Now, a lot of people in the area knew George as a homeless person, but that didn't mean that I presented him in that way. I presented him as my friend. In the past, as a young photographer, I have photographed homeless people. I haven't been maybe more as ethically and worldly as I am perhaps now, and I'm still learning to be. So this is why this is discussion. And I found that now when I do my own photo walks, I actively discourage people from photographing the homeless. I say it's just not, I feel personally it's not appropriate unless I am directly involved with something that is raising the narrative. Because you've got to remember, is nothing there. We're all aware homelessness exists. We are aware. So I don't feel how you are particularly responsible for raising it so people are aware. People are already aware. That's not to say it can't be continual, but surely it should be having context now. And when people say, oh, but I'm not getting paid, I just put the picture online, that's all I do, I'm not getting anything from it. Well, I would beg to differ, and I'm going to say this. Being paid does not necessarily need to be a form of monetary remuneration. Being paid could be every like that picture gets, every follow, every share that picture gets, everyone commenting, because every like pushes your profile further out. And actually then you are monopolizing on it, rightly or wrongly. And please understand this is a discussion, but there is an element of which you are getting something from this. And I know this is a very complicated and convoluted and often lots of tempers and opinions get thrown about here. So from a personal perspective, I do not photograph homeless people now, unless, like in the case of George, who has sadly since passed away, which was absolutely tragic and awful. God, I haven't mentioned George's name in so long. It almost feels alien that he's now gone. I do want to talk about incapacitation with some homeless people. Some homeless people, not all, but perceived homeless people, don't have the full autonomy or the same autonomy to give consent as perhaps another person can. So when they are giving consent, are they giving consent because you promised to buy them food because they're so hungry they will give you that so they obtain the food? Are they in such a desperate situation that they're like, okay, if it gets me something? And that feels a very unfair transaction. It's almost like taking advantage of someone at their lowest point to get a picture for your portfolio in order for them to have so they can eat. That's what it feels like. So they are so desperate to eat that they will give it up. And I feel that that's a horrific situation to be in. You know, you don't want your family to know that perhaps, or you don't want the world, or you don't want to be seen as a spectacle, but you're so hungry or you're so thirsty. Again, you're asking them to share themselves and share their image with the world when they're at their lowest point for return of a sandwich. How does that sit with you? That's a discussion, an open discussion I'm wanting to have. This is why this video has come about. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, this is a great time to do it, by the way. So it's just down there. Thank you. As a photographer, there is so much that comes into this whole debate, and it's hotly debated topic of photographing homeless people, perceived homeless people. Are you photographing because their poverty and the situation they're in makes that image stand out more, and you know, and that's what alerted you? Or are you actively and proactively involved in a homelessness awareness campaign, or are you using your work to promote it? Because you know what, taking a photo and putting it online and saying the homeless isn't actually promoting homelessness and letting people know about the situation. You would have to be a lot more proactive for me to honestly think that your work was to promote and highlight the issue of homelessness. I think there is so much that people can sort of say they're doing when actually, in actual fact, they're doing very little. I think we have a responsibility to have a deeper sense of responsibility towards our subject, to recognise their humanity, their humanity first and foremost, rather than just what it does for our portfolio. And again, I said this is for a debate, and I wanted to talk more about this because I feel like I'm seeing this in the forums, I'm seeing this in the chats, and you know, when you hear that judges think it's low-hanging fruit in some places, some people think it's exceptional. I personally don't enjoy seeing that kind of work unless it's part of a campaign or it's part of a reason for it to be done. There are many examples where people have won because they've done it, and you know, you ask, oh, what did this person go? Oh, I bought them a sandwich. Oh, okay, so you've got these huge accolades and they've just bought a sandwich. Brilliant. You know, handing over someone's identity and an image for a sandwich. I mean, there's a difference between photographing someone walking down the street, smoking a cigarette, and it looks effortless, to somebody who has literally got nothing in the world, and you're like, that's what makes them interesting. Let me know how you feel about this, and let's talk about it and discuss this, and let's see how we get on, because I feel like these kind of things need to be discussed. Let's talk about it in the comments. Let's get involved. No hate to anybody who does it. This is an open discussion, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.